Welcome, dear listener. Do you know your grandfather? What about your great-great-grandfather? It's estimated that Genghis Khan had 16 million grandchildren. Who knows? Maybe some of you will fall asleep listening to your great-great-grandfather's story. Tonight we'll follow the quiet sounds, hoofbeats like a steady drum, a paisa catching light, a relay horse pouring soft earth, from dawn in a riverside gyre to blue-hour courtyards where the world learns to move without shouting. If this cozy story helps you drift off, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a gentle comment. Your support keeps the journey continues. You have a map on your screen, all neat and sharp-edged, the kind that behaves itself. But the story we're entering tonight does not love straight lines. It prefers horizons. It prefers the way wind redraws a dune with the sort of confidence only wind can have. So let's fold the map away for a while and lift a felt door flap in the half-light before sunrise. Inside the round walls of a gyre, a nomad's tent, the air holds the mixed scents of wool, horse, and tea. A braid of smoke slips through the roof crown. A kettle breathes. Somewhere beyond, a river runs under a skin of morning ice, and hooves stamp in patient rhythm like a drum you can hear but not see. This is the Onan country, they say, and in many accounts it's the neighbourhood where a child named Temujin first opens his eyes. We will follow him forward through the soft hours and the harsh ones, from boy to Khan. But first, a moment of introduction just between us. We are not here to clang swords together or rattle chains. We are here to walk beside a life, to watch how a person gathers people, how ideas travel faster than galloping hooves when they're given the right roads. We'll favour the quiet details, leather creak, bowstring wax, the way a messenger ties a knot before he rides. Some facts are contested. We'll say so when they are. Some tales are shined like river pebbles by generations who told them around fires. We'll hold them gently and look at the light they still throw. So, Temujin. Some chronicles suggest he was born around the year 11 to 62, perhaps a little earlier, perhaps a little later. The name is often linked to iron, or to a Tatar captive whose name his father admired, though historians debate the exact tale. His father, Yesugei of the Borjigin line, knew how to navigate alliances as if they were rivers that braided and forked. His mother, Hoilun, knew how to make a home portable, how to turn raw grassland into a pantry one season and a roadway the next. In the quiet hours before the herd moved, she could make butter and plan for winter in the same breath. The children grew up inside that round-lidded world. Brothers Kassa and Temuga, Hachiun and more, sisters whose names flicker through the sources like distant campfires. A half-brother, Belgute too, families on the steppe were like strings plucked across many notes. The grasslands have their own grammar. Even as a child, Temujin would have learned it with his hands. The lesson starts with felt, the thick mat made from wool teased and wetted and pressed until it forgets it was ever a tangle. Felt makes walls. Felt makes a door that rolls up like a scroll. Leather holds the whole story together, straps on the saddle, thongs that tie the travois, the thong that might fasten a boy's first bow to his wrist, so he remembers not to drop it when the world surprises him. He would have learned to ride as one learns to breathe better, with no one making a speech about it. He would have learned patience from sheep and confidence from ponies. He would have learned that a good fire is a kind of friend, and a bad wind is a kind of teacher. There is a tale about the betrothal. Yesugai, planning ahead in the way steppe leaders must, takes his son to the camp of the Ongirat people and arranges a match with a young woman named Berta. The girl's family gives hospitality. The boy, in some tellings, stays a while among them, to learn their ways and to let the promise settle like a stake in the ground. On the road home, Yesugei shares food with strangers, Tatars in some versions, and falls ill. Was it poison? The old texts suggest it, but we keep our tone low. In these lands, hospitality is sacred, and a broken taboo leaves a long shadow. Yesugei does not recover. The boy returns to his mother with news that would silence a tent. The silence lasts, but only briefly. Then it changes shape, because on the steppe, a leader's protections often die with him unless he's left his people locked into alliances. Yesugei's followers, reading the weather of politics in the way herders read a cloud line, scatter to safer harbours. Holan, iron in her spine and wool at her back, gathers her children and does the arithmetic of survival. They fish. They dig wild onions. They set snares for marmots and fox. They scavenge bones for marrow, and boil them again and again until the broth is a soft, pale comfort. There are winters that feel like a test and summers that feel like a reprieve. The Orkhon inscriptions talk about destiny, but destiny still wants dinner on the table and fuel in the stove. If there's a moral hid there, it's this. Empires can wait, you find your next day first. We can picture the boy with a net of horsehair over his shoulder, watching the rim of the river for the faint tremble that means fish under ice. He learns to judge snow by how it sounds under boot. He learns that hunger doesn't shout. It whispers and then simply takes away your options one by one. If he smiles sometimes, it's at small wins. A warm stone at his back when the wind swings north. A fire catching the first time. The tangy surprise of sour milk that has decided, without asking him, to turn into something else. He will grow tall, but for now he learns to be light. Light on a horse, light on the land, light enough that when fate knocks the tent pole he can hold the ridgepole steady with both hands. In those same years comes friendship, the kind that stamps deep tracks. Another boy, Jamuka, near his age. The sources say they swore brotherhood, Anda, a pact of shared fate. It is the kind of vow you make at an age when summer seems eternal, and loyalty feels like a leather strap that will never crack. They hunt, they talk, they swap gifts of arrowheads and knucklebones polished smooth by use. The wind writes affectionate nonsense in their hair. Later, grown men will ride beneath banners and make choices that put them at odds. For now, they stand side by side at a hilltop and argue cheerfully about which herd is faster. There's a sigh in this, like a kettle that doesn't quite boil. The future is warming up, but not yet. Hard days interrupt even the best of small joys. One story, told with many variations, says that Temujin is seized by rivals, often named as the Taichiud, and set under guard with a heavy wooden kang around his neck, a frame that makes running absurd and sleep a bargain. We won't linger on roughness. We'll remember instead the better part. A family man, Sorkan Shira, who sees a boy more than a prisoner and chooses kindness. The escape in the chronicles feels like something out of the old tales of clever foxes. A hiding place in a river, a staged search, a moment when everyone pretends not to see what everyone sees. The kangyu comes off. Sometimes rescue is a shout, sometimes it's a nod and a quiet door opened at the right time. Temujin grows into young manhood like a tree gathering rings, slowly then all at once. He returns to Berta and seals the childhood promise with a marriage. There is a black sable coat mentioned, glossy and heavy as night fallen early. This coat becomes a token currency you can wear, and Temujin brings it to a senior ally, Togrul, often called Toril or Wankan in different tongues, leader of the Keret. A gift across hands is also a bridge across years. The sable is not just fur, it is a sentence in the language of alliance. We see the exchange as a quiet scene, the coat folded, then unfolded, the weight transferred, a nod that says more than the words can afford to say. A raid follows, thrown like a stone across calm water. The Merkits, remembering an old grievance, Holand's earlier year abduction, a matter we address gently, arrive in the night when walls are words and doors are cloth. They take Berta. In the telling, she vanishes into the dark like a lantern carried over a hill. Temujin does not shout into the wind. He does something more useful. He rides to Togrul. He sends word to Jamuka. He binds old threads into a new rope. Then, riding in concert, they move. The rescue, accomplished after a hard push and careful timing, returns Berta to the tent. Whatever bruises the tale implies, we touch them lightly and move forward. We center a cedar chest opening, a cloak wrapped around shoulders, a hand found in the dark. Power in these lands is sometimes a matter of speed, sometimes of memory, and sometimes of who answers when you ask. Life widens, people join. A camp is, among other things, a kind of weather prediction. If the tents are many, the weather is fair. If the lines of horse pickets stretch far as morning mist, there's confidence in the air. Temujin proves, according to many sources, quick to see skill where others see only birth. A herder who can count well might become a clerk. A boy who has a quiet eye for distant movement becomes a scout, then a scout leader, then a man whose map of streams is better than anyone's. The word merit doesn't ride on a saddle here, but the thing itself does, often enough to count. This habit of promoting ability is a seed that will later sprout roads and relay stations and a practice of passports, but for now it simply keeps people in camp. People will stay where they are seen. If you're listening with modern ears, and you are, you might hear in this a faint office comedy. Annual reviews done by campfire, promotions announced over tea, the occasional HR issue resolved by letting two riders race to the ford to see who chooses the better crossing. It's a step way of running a meeting. The agenda fits in a saddlebag. The action items are literally action items. Minutes are kept by whoever remembers best. The whiteboard is the sky. You can almost see Temujin, not yet called by the name that will roll across continents, leaning toward a young man who has a knack for logistics and saying quietly, "Take 12 men. Ride east, find water, bring back a report." Good leadership often sounds like that, domestic in its clarity, almost friendly, but carrying a current you can't miss. We turn our gaze to the on and again. The river proceeds in its own idea of time. At its banks, the world of Temujin's youth has limits that feel absolute. A rival clan over that ridge, a favourite grazing bowl over that one. But inside those limits, his home is a system in motion. He has felt the pain of being cast out. He has felt the medicine of being taken in. He has learned that a vow between two boys can become complicated when it grows into a promise between two groups of men. He has learned that gifts are more than goods. They are gambits and greetings and glue. He has learned that a name like Khan is not a decoration but a job description, and that the job starts long before anyone says the title aloud. Berta, present at the centre of the tent like a steady lamp, is both partner and anchor. Later historians record the birth of a son, Jokchi, and the whispers that came with that birth, given the calendar of capture and rescue. Temujin accepts the child as his. We leave the whispers to the wind and note the decision's stable weight. A father embraces his son. A man chooses certainty where rumour offers only drafty rooms. The family grows, Chagatai, Ogidei, Tolui, and the tent feels larger not only because of numbers, but because of a widening idea of future. With children to educate and protect, a person's map expands, even if his feet have not yet passed beyond a familiar cordon of hills. And then there is the matter of distance, which in step life is a relative term. A day's ride that once felt long now feels reasonable. A courier system begins in small ways. Two boys who always know where the other is camped. A cousin with a good horse sent ahead to tell the elders that help is coming. These improvised lines are the sketches of something more. A habit of moving information with respect and speed. In later chapters, this becomes the yam, a relay of riders, stations, and official tablets that can fold the empire in on itself like a letter. For now, in our quiet part 1, it is simply a thread through the grass, where one set of hoof prints overlays another, and a message continues on without stopping to rest its breath. Conflicts, of course, do not vanish just because we lower our voices. Rivals test boundaries. Old friends like Jamuka sometimes find their paths diverging, then colliding. We choose not to stage this as a clash of symbols, but as the slow, inevitable unrolling of differences. In how to rule, in whom to reward, in what to do when the past knocks on the tent pole and asks for the sort of payment that no longer makes sense. Temujin's camp grows, and with growth comes definition. Who protects the weak? Who distributes plunder? Who ensures that a herder's widow is not left behind when the herd moves? Once you start answering questions like these in ways that endure till next season, you're already halfway to being a lawgiver, whether you set out to be one or not. There is a charm in watching organisation take shape. 10 riders become a squad, 10 squads become a wing. The numbers matter less right now than the thought behind them. Patterns that let people move without bumping into one another. Patterns that let responsibility land where it belongs. He chooses men with talent and women with sense and builds a circle that can hold under stress. You see it in little scenes. A scribe leaning over a strip of birch bark, his knife shaved down to a sliver to make the letters thin. A cook setting aside extra millet because she suspects someone important will arrive hungry after the moon has already climbed. A horse groom experimenting with a new way of packing a saddle so a rider can go 2 days without chafing. The Empire is already here in miniature in the way they think about tomorrow. Tonight we keep returning to small things because small things do not alarm, they reassure. The Chronicle of the Secret History, a primary source shrouded in its own mysteries, offers portraits of people as they speak and choose and change. We will not quote it here, we will let its spirit work like ember heat in the background. In its pages, Temujin is not a statue, but a person who remembers slights and retakes kindness, who can be both stern and unexpectedly tender, who can forgive calculatedly, who can adapt faster than most men can finish a sentence. If you're listening in the dark, adjusting your pillow or sipping a last mouthful of warm tea, you might hear in this the hum of modern leadership seminars. The Steppe discovered the basics a long time ago. Hire for skill, remove obstacles, reward loyalty, keep the tea hot. As part 1 draws toward its closing bell, imagine an evening outside the tent with the sky flaring in bands. Copper, then plum, then the nearly colourless blue you only see just before the stars switch on. Temujin stands with a few companions. The air is clean in the way high air often is, emptied out by wind and time. Somewhere beyond a wolf calls, but it sounds less like a threat and more like someone clearing his throat before speaking. In the camp, people are already asleep with the trust that comes from feeling looked after. Berta has dimmed the lamp. 2 boys who will be men soon are arguing in low voices about whose father owned the faster horse 10 years ago. The argument is so old it is practically a song. The leader tightens a girth strap, then tests it again, though he does not plan to ride right now. He is listening to the steppe. It is a habit he never loses. There is an adage about the grassland, that all large things are made of small ones arranged correctly. Wool becomes felt. Felt becomes a wall. Walls become a home that travels. People are no different. From fish under early ice to alliances sealed with fur, from boys' games to men's promises, from a quiet rescue to a crowded encampment that has begun to behave like a city without streets, Temujin has been arranging his small things with care. Power for him will eventually be a portable fire. But tonight, it is only a warmth inside a round room, a sleeping child's breath, a rope coiled neatly on a peg, a bow unstrung and oiled, and the knowledge that when morning arrives, so will decisions. Tomorrow, the kind of tomorrow that arrives with banners and meetings and a word like Khan spoken so softly it shakes the air, tomorrow will have time enough for itself. For now, the stars are out. The river slides under its thin ice crust, pretending to be asleep while it keeps moving. Somewhere across the dark, hoofbeats drum a patient code, a scout returning with news that he has the grace not to shout across camp. The felt door lifts once, lets in a stripe of gelid air, and closes again. In your mind's hand, touch the kettle's iron handle, the worn leather of a saddle, the dense weave of felt. These are the building blocks. In the morning they will be the means of turning one person's resilience into a people's momentum. But we are not there yet. We end where we began, the threshold of a gear at dawn. The smoke thread rises, the kettle sighs, a boy who has endured hunger, escape, and the first stitchings of alliance steps out into the cold and tastes the day. A horse leans against the halter pole and snorts a greeting that is half steam and half gossip. The wind writes a new line on the hills and then, pleased with itself, erases it. Temujin tightens the girth and pauses, listening as if the land itself has spoken his name. The map you folded at the start can wait a little longer. Here, in this ordinary morning, history is finding its saddle, and the steppe, courteous as ever, listens back. Night breathes out, and a thin seam of pale light opens along the eastern hills. In the camp, ropes creak like contented old men, kettles turn impatient, and horses test their pickets with those familiar conversational stamps. You can smell felt that slept in frost, and now begins to loosen, releasing the wool's shy warmth. Part 1 left us at the tent flap of a morning with Temujin listening to the land the way a careful reader listens to the small words. We step back into that same air. The wind has a plan today, and so quietly does he. By now his household is larger, his circle denser. You can feel it in the texture of sound, more voices, more hooves, more chores that operate like gears and catch at just the right teeth. Fires in a line, smoke braided by breeze, bowls of tea making their rounds. The little empire of a single camp already rehearses something bigger. It is a city without walls, a government without desks, and yet it does its paperwork with ropes, lists, and memory. People notice who eats last, who checks the hobbles twice, who sees the lonely child near the edge of the circle and makes sure she is counted before the herd moves. Those small noticings recruit hearts long before titles do. The steppe, though, does not let anyone collect loyalties like coins without charging a price. Friendships become crossroads. Jamuka, once an Anda, a sworn brother, lives within horseback distance in more than one sense. Near enough to wave, near enough to disagree. They are both able men, both fluent in the grammar of the grasslands, both hungry for a patent that lifts people out of the weather. But they differ on how to climb. Some versions say Jamuka favours the old aristocratic bones of the steppe, the white bones, while Temujin has a knack for hearing the music in the black bones, commoners whose skill outruns their pedigree. It is a soft difference at first, like the pitch between two flutes, but the ear hears it, and soon the camp does too. When the first real tests arrive, they come with the usual disguises. A quarrel here, a missing herd there, rumours blowing downriver like seeds that will find their soil eventually. What matters is how Temujin responds. He does not rush to punish or posture, he gathers, listens, apportions. He asks scouts to map routes like threads on a loom. He swaps riders between bands so cousins learn to ride with strangers and come back less certain that old borders are best. He marries his need for speed to his love of order, and out of that marriage a shape begins to appear. Lines of 10, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands. It is less a revelation than a remembering. You stack small, you carry big. The words matter too. 10 riders are an Arban, 100 make a Zun, 1,000 a Mingan, 10,000 are 2 men. The beauty here is not just arithmetic, it's kindness to the human brain. People can hold 10 names in their head. A commander can look his 10 in the eye. 10 such commanders can meet by a river and align in the time it takes to boil a kettle. The steppe has always known that distance is a trickster. Temujin's solution is to break distance into friendly pieces and give each piece a leader who knows his people's horses by the sound they make when shaking off sleep. Of course, numbers alone don't cause men to ride toward one another instead of away. For that, he adds a principle that feels modern and very old at once: promotion by talent. The camp's best Fletcher might find his way into logistics because he sees how materials move. The quietest herdsman becomes a fearfully good scout. The clever girl who remembers every count of lambs grows into the keeper of rations for 1,000. Temujin does not ask where skill came from, he asks where it should go. If leadership is a fire, he gathers dry wood without checking the tree it fell from. In a world that has long preferred family names to personal merit, this is both merciful and disruptive. It keeps the tents fuller and the air busier with plans. Jamuka's camp hears the music of change and does not love the tune. In some tellings, he assumes the title Gur Khan, a universal Khan, a name large enough to wear like a sky. Temujin does not argue titles with titles, he argues with behaviour. He takes in orphans, he disciplines theft that threatens the shared larder. He insists that if a woman is carried off, her consent is not a detail to be shrugged at. He makes blood feuds briefly bow to a judge's patient eye. Sources disagree on whether all of this belonged to a codified Yasa at once, or was the slow collection of edicts and customs that later chroniclers bound together under one leather strap. We keep our language careful. The law was part inherited, part invented, and all carried in bodies that remembered. In the between times, those long steppe afternoons when clouds assemble and unassemble like thoughtful sheep, the camp learns to move as one. Ropes are coiled into the same loops, fires built in the same triangles, saddles hung at the same height on the same windward side. Men bring bows to the Fletcher at dusk, not at dawn. Women who manage travelling households compare notes on packing, and a best practice spreads like rain across hard ground. If there is a joke here, and there is, it's that somewhere in the rolling grasslands a management consultant has just lost her job to a grandmother, with a good memory and a better voice. But nothing knits a house like a storm. Trouble with the Kerit, led by Turil, the ally of the Sablecoat, ripens from polite friction into something drier. Turil's son, Sengum, hears talk that Temujin's star is climbing faster than his father's. Pride, that ancient horse with a habit of bolting, gets loose. There are midnight conversations in tents that pretend to be about weather, but are really about power. In the old way, when status feels imperiled, one cures the fever by redefining friendship, and soon riders who once drank from the same pot begin to circle apart with new caution in their eyes. What follows is not the storybook line of victory after victory. There is an ambush near sandy ground, some sources call it the Kalakaljid Sands, where Temujin's people scatter like beads from a necklace whose cord has snapped. Defeat is a teacher with a steady hand. In the aftermath comes a scene that survives in memory as the Baljuna Covenant, a small mixed company, Mongol, Turkic, Moor, sharing blood and water and vows when their world has pinched down to its smallest circle. It is not a ceremony with trumpets. It is the kind of promise the cold makes and hardship signs. From this tight ring of loyalty, the future will widen again. Widen it does, the Kerit are later undone, their kingly tent collapsing under the weight of its own negotiations. Turil dies on the run, unrecognised at a checkpoint in one version, swallowed by the fast arithmetic of war in another. Temujin mourns the friend that was, not the enemy that became. He forbids the kind of desecration that satisfies anger by creating more of it. In a world that remembers humiliation forever, simple restraint is a mercy that stretches farther than a chase. Now the Naaman rise at the western edges of the familiar map, broad-shouldered people with their own way of moving, and a leader in Tayang Khan, whose son-in-law Kuchlug will matter more in later chapters. There's a meeting out near the mountains where the earth changes colour when it rains. Standards lean in their holders, the air tastes like metal. The fight that comes is shaped by the new discipline, by units that know how to hinge and fold, how to pretend to melt away, and then reform as if heat had been hiding them a moment. We won't lean into clash. We will stand in the lee of a hill and watch a signal flag go up at the exact second it needs to, and we will note how much harm a good plan can spare the world. When the dust settles, the Naaman Centre gives, and the old order gives with it. Kuchlug escapes, and a memory trail of that escape will later lead across strange lands. For now, we tuck the loose thread and ride on. The habit of absorbing, rather than simply conquering, distinguishes the camp that Temujin leads. Artisans are kept close and protected. Scribes are asked to write even when the stories sting. Blacksmiths shape not only iron, but policy. A man who can make a better stirrup can also make a better schedule. And under it all, a guard takes form, the Keshig, day and night watchers of men whose first loyalty is to the person on whom the order rests. The guard is more than a circle of strongbacks. It is a library of trust. It hears the breathing of the leader's tent and learns when to let silence answer a knock. What about law? The word yasa moves through sources like a shadow cast by a moving flame. Some describe a body of rules promulgated at gatherings. Others hint at an evolving conversation stamped at intervals by the Khan's seal. Likely both are true in parts. The rules have the brisk household common sense that keeps a family from tripping over itself. Do not steal from your neighbour's grazing animals, as if pasture solved ownership. Do not turn feuds into tornadoes. Do not take a woman's will as a removable ornament. Care for envoys. Protect those who make and mend. Share out the meat from a hunt in a way that lets winter trust summer again. These are not the law codes of walled cities with churches and courts. They are the living etiquette of a people who wake and travel and must still see the faces they judged yesterday, today. Summons go out. The word Kurultai, the assembly, lyric with the feel of people coming in from many compass points, is whispered more often. The old men look at the sky and say the signs are clean. The younger men rehearse ceremony by practicing their posture of listening. Women sew and laugh and run the households that will tomorrow be called a nation, and today are still deliciously domestic, full of small crises solved with rope and wit. When the day comes, the place has the calm of inevitability. We are told it is near the Onan, others say Hirlan. Some know a bend or hill by heart, but what matters is not the proper noun. What matters is the circle that forms and the decision that rises. Stand in that circle with the skin prickle that comes when watching history make its own soap bubble of time. Banners with horsehair streamers, white for times of peace, lift in a manner that looks like breathing. The elders speak a little and nod a lot. Tribes that fought each other in the old style now send their champions to kneel and to rise with a new name on their tongues. Temujin is acclaimed as Genghis Khan, Genghis in the versions the West later says. The title's etymology is debated. Sources suggest ideas like firm, universal, and strong. No matter the dictionary, the sound of it is the point, a syllable that sits low and balanced in the chest, the kind of word you can say in high wind and trust to arrive with its edges intact. Do the heavens acknowledge this? The chroniclers say so with the kinds of signs chroniclers love. We, respectful and sleepy-minded, simply notice the careful human work. After the acclaim comes the assigning. The thousands are allotted households placed under this banner, then that. So no leader has only his cousins for company. The guard expands, the Keshig splits into day and night and shifts by seasons. They're training a quiet mathematics of attention. A yam, a relay of stations, is sketched into being on the dirt with a stick. Distances measured by how long a good horse can hold an easy pace. Posts set near water and wind shelter. Riders chosen for endurance and a particular kind of cheerful stubbornness. Someone produces a gleaming tablet, a paisa, a passport made of metal and authority that tells the outpost keeper to hand over a fresh mount and a bowl of hot something without argument. A state is taking notes on itself, the notes are legible. Listen for the laws again amid the stir. A scribe reads aloud the policies that will keep households from unravelling, how to handle the spoils from a hunt or a raid so that neither greed nor neglect writes the story. How to receive surrendered enemies, Gundor, so tomorrow's enemy has the courage to become tomorrow's ally. How to shelter the old and the orphan, because a people that forgets them forgets its own future. Clergy of many stripes, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian of the Nestorian fold, shamans of the old ways. Breathe easier, because tolerance is not a mood here but a method. The ruler favours what works. Peaceful trade works. Artisans work. A road that returns riders with news works. A jail for every grudge does not. You can walk through this newly named confederation and watch it become a country in gestures. A boy with a bent for languages is posted near the southern paths where Chinese and Mongolian mingle like two rivers with different temperatures. A woman with a gift for numbers is handed a roll of tallies and told to make certain everybody gets their winter share. A messenger arrives at dusk and nobody makes him wait until morning to be heard. At a station between stations, a smith's wife, tired but not unkind, restitches a saddle flap for a soldier, because it will squeak if left alone, and squeaks spread like rumours. If there is a budget meeting in all this, it smells like boiled mutton, and feels like chores done ahead of schedule, which is exactly the kind of thrilling that lets people sleep well. Not all fabric is smooth the moment it leaves the loom. Jamuka re-enters the story as a defeated rival betrayed by followers who wanted his power turned into their safety. They bring him bound. Temujin rejects the betrayal and punishes the traitors. Loyalty that switches masks too easily as a kind of theft. As for Jamuka himself, sources say Temujin offers closeness. Jamuka refuses and asks for an end that honours a nobleman's body without spilling blood. We will not detail the method. We will linger instead on the mood. Old companions in a room quiet as felt, the wind kept outside, two men who once swore brotherhood, choosing what story their last meeting will tell. It tells dignity, it tells that mercy and sorrow can be the same flavour when the past is finished with you. From the 1206 Karul tie forward, the new title is not a crown so much as a harness. Genghis Khan knows what he has yoked himself to. A people expanding both outward and inward. Outward, the campaigns that will shape our next parts. Inward, the production of order that makes expansion more than a sprint toward a cliff. He names generals who will become legends, whispered kindly. Subade with the patience of water, Jebe with an arrow's mind, and gives them tumans to care for rather than to waste. He binds his sons to responsibilities and his daughters to marriages that are less transactions than treaties, and he lets his mother, Hoelun, be the weather system she has always been, frank immovable, and good for crops. What does a day look like for a unifier? It looks like paperwork that you have to tie to a saddle. It looks like a council with bowls set out first, then maps. It looks like an inspection of horse herds with praise delivered to boys who understand that good hooves are policy. It looks like a reprimand to an officer who tried to turn prisoners into trophies. No, we make tomorrow here, and tomorrow needs hands. It looks like granting a market safe conduct because prosperity is a good spy and travels far, telling believers and doubters alike that order has arrived wearing a pleasant face. It looks like an evening where the lamp is turned low and the leader asks a single quiet question that sorts noise from signal. What will happen if we do nothing? We should stop for a moment at the relay stations, because they are the Empire's heartbeat. A gelding with a glossy barrel waits in a pen that smells like hay and iron. A boy, not much older than the horse, checks the girth for the third time just in case. The postmaster, he has a title now, something official, something that frays into friendliness on ordinary lips, has a chart in his head of which rider's knees ache, and which mare will sulk if given to a stranger. A courier arrives, dust in his eyebrows like a blessing, and the exchange takes less time than a sigh. He's given a bowl, a new mount, a grin that says, "Keep going, friend." The letter in his pouch is not merely ink on bark or silk. It is the Empire folding itself into itself, a hand touching its own shoulder to check that the arm is still there. In the time it takes a rumour to wake, the state has already acted. The guard too deserves a glance. By day, by night, by season, the Keshig learn to be a moving wall and a listening ear. They practice presence like others practice archery. They are a ritual as much as a defence. The body of the leader is where the pattern is stamped first, and so the body is protected, yes, but also observed. The guard watches not just for danger from outside, but for fatigue within. When a man carries a horizon on his back, you give him people who will say, "Sir, drink water," and "Sir, sleep." From such ordinary cautions, extraordinary endurance is made. Few epics applaud the 8 who insists on a nap, but without him empires become very interesting and then very short. You can hear the new confidence in the way jokes return. A carpenter says the org chart is a yurt ring, and that everyone reports to the smoke hole. A cook says she runs the true treasury because she knows how many sacks of millet are left and coins cannot be boiled. A child wrestling with a foal that has opinions declares himself head of the Ministry of Convincing. People laugh, and the sound is not nervous. If leadership were a winter coat, you would call this one lined and well mended. It does not pretend to be summer. It simply keeps the camp very good at living through winter. Even the old quarrels find new edges rubbed off. A man whose brother died in a raid years ago, one of those griefs that eats a little of every season thereafter, finds himself on patrol with the son of the man he once swore to hate. They spend a night in the same ditch waiting for the same signal. Dawn unknots something. The new law is not about forgetting. It is about choosing which memories can walk with you without tripping your feet. The Khan's insistence on order creates those chances. The camp moves as if the ground were fresh. The past follows more politely. When Genghis Khan rides the lines at dusk, he sees not only horses and men, he sees the future placed like pegs in this boy's quick eyes, in that woman's steady hands, in a scribe's careful way of making two columns align, gifts that will scale because the shape above them makes sense. The banners, white for peace now, black to come when the road must be taken, stir as if remembering where the wind used to come from. He has not yet set his eye on Zhongdu or the river cities to the west with their merchant guilds and tall storerooms. He has not yet traced with a stick a line through the desert toward a palace where a shah counts caravans. But the road toward those places is in the camp already. A relay post, a guard, a law that holds even when a man with cousins wants it to bend. A habit of taking in talent like water. And so we reach evening, again still. A courier arrives, dust soft, carrying a wooden tube capped at both ends. Inside, on folded paper that smells of smoke and gum, a list of households who wish to join under the white standards. The letter is read by the lamplight. A decision is made not with fanfare, but with that quiet finality that makes sleep easier for 1,000 souls. Holand sends for more bowls, because more mouths are more warmth, and besides, soup multiplies with astonishing grace if coaxed properly. Berta, the lamp of the centre, checks on a girl in a doorway and tells her, Your mother has a place, which is a way of saying so do you. If you step a pace beyond the firelight, the night carries the metallic sweetness of frozen air. Stars fill up the bowl of the world in that generous way they have when far from smoke. The day's work has made, not a map, but the guarantee that a map will matter when drawn. The decimal lines are not strings but spines. The law is less a hammer than a guardrail you fail to see until it keeps you from the ditch. The new title sits on Temujin's shoulders like a saddle that fits, and when he tests its weight, there is no creak, only the good low hum of leather that knows its rider. Tomorrow pulls, as always. South of the mountains, walls stand that thought they had learned how to teach the wind manners. West, along long rivers edged with reeds, markets jingle softly at dawn. There will be embassies and misunderstandings and the recruitment of engineers who stare at stone the way horsemen stare at sky. But tonight belongs to the unifying of the human pieces, to the practice that turns bright moments into durable days. A boy at the edge of camp watches a standard lifting and lowering and lifting, and he wonders if banners get tired. They do not, someone tells him. They rest while you sleep. Before we close part 2, take the small souvenir you always can from these quiet chapters. The sense that order is a kindness, that building a state from tents and vows is as tactile as stitching 2 pieces of felt with wet fingers and a bone needle, that laws can be blankets when they are woven from supervision and care instead of sharpened from fear. That information, whispered efficiently from post to post, is warmth shared on a long road rather than a secret hug to grow cold. And that the wind, even as it plays with horsehair streamers and tastes the rim of the kettle, approves of any human plan that keeps the camp ready to move without losing itself. We fold the scene gently. Banners ease, ropes slacken into their night posture. A guard's spear tip reflects a last wink from the fire. Somewhere in the distance, a rider leaves a station with fresh reins, a paiser glittering like a small moon under his cloak. He vanishes into the quiet with a message that will arrive faster than trouble for once. Back at the heart of camp, the Khan, Genghis now, by the circle's word, listens to the wind's new language. It sounds, to a patient ear, like hoofbeats organising themselves into a cadence. You can almost see the next road begin to draw itself in the dark, and the steppe, as always, listens back. Evening gathers in layers, and the camp's smoke makes soft ribbons against a sky that still remembers heat. Somewhere south, stone tries to teach the wind good manners. It is called a wall, and it stretches like a thought that refuses to end. You've seen it in pictures, later centuries and tourist socks, but tonight we visit it as rumour and ridge. Watchtowers with square shoulders, gates with throats of echo. The steppe breathes on its far side. Horses stamp in the frost. A boy at a relay post warms his hands against a kettle and listens for the message that will send him south, past thorn and tamarisk, toward those gates that pretend to be the end of everything. The unifying has settled into muscle memory. The white standards ripple when the wind is in a teaching mood. The keshig pass quietly around the leader's tent as if polishing the night, and the decimal commands, 10, 100, 1,000, behave less like arithmetic and more like a chorus that knows its harmony. From this steadiness, Genghis Khan turns his gaze along the great arc of land where grass is thin and fields begin, where the Jin dynasty keeps its storehouses and its paper seals, its market bells and its soldiers' boots that prefer pavement to mud. Relations have been tense for years, tribute promised, gifts exchanged, insults and embassies weaving like 2 threads that tug in opposite directions. Sources differ on which slight mattered most. In the dark, the practical mind ignores pride and inventory scans instead. Forage, horses, roads, the willingness of stone to argue with patient men. War in this telling comes dressed as logistics. The army that rides south is not a roar but a rhythm, 1,000 small preparations that the wind will never bother to report. Spare mounts for each rider so speed can be poured from one horse into another without spilling. Felt screens to keep bows dry when the air throws needles. Grain counted, bagged, lashed to carts whose wheels have opinions about every rut. Signals rehearsed so a hand lifted at the horizon speaks clearly to men who have never learned each other's dialects but know the language of movement. A winter push means frozen rivers become roads, ice settling into a level that refuses to buckle under skilled hoof. The steppe gives a gift, and the riders take it with the gratitude of people who planned for exactly this season. Scouts write their reports in hoofprints and then translate them into quiet briefings by firelight. The passes are named in many tongues. The ridgelines keep their own counsel. A letter to a governor rides ahead in a wooden tube. Surrender and be left to your ledgers. Resist and meet the patience of those who have no appointments to keep elsewhere. Messenger after messenger vanishes down the long pages of the land. The yam stations, that useful necklace of posts, hum at every bead. A postmaster looks up at each arrival as if expecting him specifically. A boy holds a cup of hot milk like the world's smallest brazier. A pizer gleams and closes arguments before they open. Authority travels faster here than rumour, which is a rare improvement in human affairs and counts as a kind of miracle. Stone appears first as a rumour. Watchtowers squaring their shoulders on mild hills and the long spines of wall that run like punctuation in the earth. The wall is a boundary, a tax ledger written in mud and brick, a decision about where to place fear. At its gates, the air tastes slightly of iron and old edicts. The riders come on in a disciplined looseness, the kind that looks casual from a distance and turns out close up to be geometry with excellent posture. There is no rush to throw men against stone. Scouts flow left and right and bring back the two things stone cannot forbid: a path and a plan. Campaigns begin with a hinge opening, and one of the earliest swings wide in the year 1211. Sources call the place Yehuling, Wild Fox Ridge, the kind of name that warns you even as it purrs. The Jin field a great host, dense and bright with banners, their heavy cavalry like ironcloth, and their footmen a forest of spears whose tops glitter as if grain had learned war. The steppe brings a different weather. Riders who know how to become wind, a feigned retreat that would shame most actors, arrows whose thirst is for distance, not drama. There is the outline of collision, but what happens feels more like untying a knot. The ridge, the passes, the banners, one by one, they learn to bow to speed. The Jin line, tested, folds in places it thought were triple-stitched. We stand behind a hill and watch signal flags tilt at exactly the moments chosen in last night's whisper. We hear the hush that falls when a victory is not an explosion but a decision ripening. Jibe, with an archer's mind that loves angles more than adjectives, learns the southern frontier the way a shepherd learns his flock, each fold, each trick of shade. Subedé, patient as water-finding stone's weak seam, will travel so far in later years that maps will have to be stretched to keep up. For now, he tests ring roads and back doors, how to circle a city without being seen, and how to be seen just enough to make a governor feel suddenly very interested in the practical blessings of surrender. They are not magicians, they are consummate students. They watch, learn, practice, adjust. It is almost disappointingly sensible, like learning a song by its chords instead of daring the melody first. Then when the tune is known, they dare plenty. Siegecraft arrives not as a single gift, but as a wagon train of them, each box labelled in a different language. Khitan and Chinese engineers with hands that smell of smoke and lime explain diagrams on scraped bark, the curves of counterweight trebuchets like birds' necks in flight. Sappers discuss Earth as if it were a character in a story that can be coaxed into different moods. Bridges on carts roll up to moats that had hoped to be final. Towers grow from stacked timbers and decide to look the horizon straight in the eye. The armoury of wood and rope is loud, practical, and oddly cheerful, a conversation between materials as much as between enemies. The Khan's order is simple and unromantic: protect those who build, praise those who learn, punish theft that endangers the collective stomach. The Jin court is neither ignorant nor asleep. They send spies and scouts too. They offer terms with gifts whose silk is the right width, and whose colours have meaning so detailed you could get lost in them like a tasteful maze. Some Mongol envoys return with compliments and information. Some do not return at all. Where the dance needs to look like war, it does. Where it can look like governance, it prefers to. Letters go ahead of reinforcements. Towns choose their future with varying degrees of grace. A mayor with a keen ear for the weather offers keys and receives in return protection for markets, and a promise that artisans will be registered, not removed. Another holds out and then discovers that winter is not a lobbyist you want to face alone. We pause at a city whose name has changed with dynasties, but whose smell, warm flour, old ink, horse, always returns at dawn. Markets are closed before a battle, but you can still sense the promise of morning stalls, sesame cakes, copper bells, thread coiled like sunsets. In siege, the attention shifts to gates that seem to hold their breath. Engineers direct ropes and weights with a calm that would do well in a nursery. Arrows thump pleasantly into wooden pavises. On the wall, crossbows answer in a rhythm, friendly as work songs if you forget what they're singing about. A surrender flag appears, white cloth nervously decisive. Terms are read. The gate opens like a person trying to look unstartled. The first into the city are not swords, but ledgers. Then there is the capital, Zhongdu, the city that future maps will say is Beijing. It stands with an old kind of confidence, towers and walls, and the dense, sweet smell of grain kept dry through imaginative summers. Temples hold chants like warm bread holds steam. The Jin court gathers with a quiet that is louder than panic. It is 12:13 by some counts, when a tightening ring begins, the camp's moving like the minute to hand you forget is moving because it is so decent about taking its time. By 12:14, negotiation arrives like rain. A peace is proposed. Tribute will be rich. A princess will be sent. Trade will flow like a carefully supervised river. The Mongols accept. They are not puritanical about victory feeling like paperwork. But peace is a string instrument that requires constant tuning, and the weather changes. The Jin court, calculating, frightened, rational in the way households are when they try to do too much with too little, chooses a different axis. The emperor moves the seat of rule south to Kaifeng, taking the empire's centre with him as if the centre were luggage. The gesture reads, to step eyes, as both practical and evasive. It breaks something in the air. The Mongol leadership decides that a promise has become a riddle, and they have not time for riddles. The ring tightens again. Zhongdu must answer. Sieges are long conversations held at cold distances. Mongol units take turns at the patient parts. Gates become moods. Sappers listen to ground as if to children whispering secrets of worms and water. Engineers point at the sky and discuss counterweights. Inside the walls, according to chronicles, stores shrink and politics swells. The people endure with the fortitude of cities everywhere that learn the true cost of being important. We move past this gently, letting silence fill in the hard shapes. Outside, winter does what it does best. Teach clarity. Fires burn in lines so a commander can walk warmth to warmth and feel morale under his hands like good cloth. Even in besiegement, rules are kept to delicate. Markets outside the lines continue under supervision. Artisans who want to shift camps are escorted, registered, and set to work where their skill shines. Blacksmiths are gold, carpenters are gold, translators are double gold. A governor sent to administer a surrendered district is told, in the homely language of orders that stick, to keep books that make sense and to widen the road rather than invent tolls. If he abides, he eats well. If he does not, he discovers that this regime understands the difference between mistakes and habits. One evening, as dust turns sugar pink and a chill like clean glass runs along the fields, a messenger brings what everyone has been waiting for without saying the words, a signal from inside that the gates will speak. Whether it is a faction that tires of famine, or a calculation that a generous enemy is preferable to a hungry friend, the chronicles leave to the genres that love drama. We accept the modest version. The city chooses survival. The gates open in the year 1215. There is a moment where history inhales. The first to enter are men with lists, then come guards with very clean instructions. Protection is extended to temples and scholars where possible, not out of romance, but because knowledge and morale are as useful as walls if you plan not to live like a moth. Grain stores are counted aloud. Fires are organised, not allowed to wander. People who know how to organise people, those plain magicians, are invited, not coerced. Craftsmen and their families are told where to find shelter. There is damage, there are losses. We put a blanket of quiet over those and touch only the policy. Once the city is within the circle, it is a place to knit, not to shred. The administrative afterlight spreads like tea. Appointments are made. A darukachi, an overseer, may be placed. A representative whose job is to balance extraction and care the way a good cook balances salt. Guards learn city corners the way riders learn ravines. Markets reopen with a timidity that turns by the week into boldness. A caravan from the north arrives blinking, surprised to discover that the route that had felt like surgery now sounds like dinner. Money resumes behaving like money. People return to that favourite human occupation, complaining about small inconveniences, which is always a sign that life has stepped away from cliffs. The campaign's lessons settle in with the satisfying click of a lid on a well-made box. 1. Winter is a colleague if you do your chores. 2. Stone is stubborn but loves an honest engineer. 3. Information has legs of its own when you build it a road. 4. Merit scales. 5. Generosity is not weakness. It is a tactic for owning tomorrow. The riders head north for seasons, then back south, as if keeping their muscles balanced. A city has been taken, yes, but more importantly, it has been integrated, folded into a larger rhythm that prefers taxes paid to barricades manned, that enjoys a good bridge, that respects a census with tidy columns. Subde and Jebi, given more assignments, test the idea that walls are invitations to go around as often as to go through. They ride in loops that later cartographers will turn into arrows, so confident you'd think maps had self-esteem. A fort is bypassed. A region is coaxed. A town that imagined itself a stalactite of resistance melts into a stalagmite of opportunity. The news moves faster than rumour again. Surrender well, and your children will learn their letters with both hands warm. Resist badly, and your granary will learn geography it did not ask to learn. Somewhere in the middle of a night, a scholar who had expected to flee finds himself instead advising a general on where the best scribes live, and feels his pulse agree with history. In the saddle, Genghis Khan rides his lines and feels the weight of the new knowledge like a comfortable coat. He praises without utter fevers. He corrects without speeches. He asks for the names of someone's best men, remembers them when he names assignments later, which is the kind of thing that makes a camp explode quietly with loyalty. He commissions more engineers than poets this year, though he listens to a poem in private if it is put in his hand by someone who has been useful in other, measurable ways. He taps a map and asks a simple question. If we did not exist, what would this city do next? The answer tells him where to stand tomorrow. Meanwhile, the relay posts grow confident in their own ordinary magic. A rider changes mounts and leaves his thanks as the steamson still rises off the new horse's neck. The postmaster hangs a worn-out girth on a peg with the ceremony of the musician retiring a string. The boy with the kettle learns to skim milk with 2 fingers and not flinch. Snow comes politely. Barley twitches under its blanket and decides to forgive spring again when it comes. The Empire's veins thicken. If you put your ear to the ground in a quiet place, you can hear the hummingbird sound of messages passing, and it makes the hair on your arm stand up the way it does when someone you trust calls your name without raising their voice. Back north, the unifier who has become a taker of capitals does not begin to believe that Stone is afraid of him. He believes instead in checklists. He keeps a soft, relentless eye on grain. He makes sure that the officers who boast the loudest are sent on errands that require more patience than drama. He kisses his sons on the head and weighs them with his eyes like a farmer weighs a cloud. He listens to his mother's blunt truths the way he listens to weather forecasts. Uncomfortable and indispensable. He tells his guard captain to recruit for kindness as well as courage, because the tent of a man who cannot forgive will one day collapse on everyone inside. From beyond the mountains, new rumours arrive stitched to the saddles of merchants. To the west, river cities under a Shah count caravans with bureaucratic exactness. And in the south, the Jinn's southern neighbours watch and calculate and send quiet notes to one another about the price of horses. The world is both larger and smaller than it was in the morning. The campaign against the Jinn has not ended history. It has widened the room history inhabits. Scholars who used to argue about poetry in a garden now also argue about grain allotments in meeting halls. A bridle with a clever adjustment becomes a policy when multiplied by 10,000. A road improved in one place makes a rumour change its mind 3 towns away. Near a river that does not care about dynasties, a market day resumes. You can smell peppers and leather and the human spring of clean laundry. A monk buys ink and a soldier buys a rope, and a child discovers that a tinker knows how to make a broken spoon sing. The crowd walks past men in new uniforms whose posture has more of the law than the battlefield in it. No one thinks the world is perfect. Everyone feels that it is at least persuadable. This is what good administration buys. The chance to have an ordinary errand and come home with exactly the story you expected to tell. Peace is not an abstract ideal here. It is the absence of surprises when carrying eggs. At night, the camp lies again under that tablecloth of stars. The old jokes return with new verses. Someone says the wall was meant to stop the wind and only succeeded in making the wind a better conversationalist. Someone else says engineers are magicians with math, and that the real spell was getting men who enjoy galloping to like waiting. A cook announces that ladders are just vertical roads and claims she invented them. People laugh in that relaxed way that empties the lungs completely. It is the sound of a machine cooling down after work it enjoyed doing well. But the leader's mind is not a machine. It is a field with paths. He walks them. He remembers the first hard winters when hunger had a voice. He recalls the cangur around a neck that once argued with the sky. He thinks of Berta's steady lamp and Hoylund's hawk gaze, of Jamuka's last proud quiet, of a sable coat given to a friend who later became a test, and of how the laws he now expects from others came to him most honestly from women who ran households that were states in all but the telling. The wall in the south has been crossed and learned. It is no longer the edge of the world. It is a set of sentences in a language the camp now speaks. We should end where work does, at a desk that can be rolled and a map that can be folded. Lantern light gilds the edges of a sheaf of grain ledgers. A clerk, hands permanently perfumed with ink and pride, ties a red cord around a bundle that says Zhongdu, stores and repairs. Another clerk blows gently on a list of names, engineers, wheelwrights, translators, who will be offered positions worth crossing a river for. In the corner, an engineer sketches a counterweight with a piece of charcoal and leaves a thumbprint that will still be there when 1,000 meals have been cooked above this floor. The burner hisses the happy song of the water being slightly too hot for a long time. Outside, a guard taps his spear twice on the ground. Not alarm, just habit. And a horse sneezes as if to second the motion. The knight takes a last breath before bedding down. Southward, the wall does what good architecture always does after the crowds go home. It holds the memory of footsteps without choosing who was right. The wind goes back to being itself, an eloquent creature content to argue only with grass and grain. In the tents, men whose names the chronicles will mispronounce sleep like boys after chores. And somewhere just before sleep finds him, the Khan hears the same faint rumour he heard at the start. Not of stone speaking, but of roads answering. He smiles, small, the size of a tucked thread. The wall has been read, the page has been turned, and the step, as ever, listens back. Night presses gently on the tents, and somewhere a pigeon beats a soft rhythm into the dark, testing the air over a line of dunes. The camp breathes in its practiced way, ropes easing, embers reasoning with the last sticks, and you can smell leather that has remembered the day, the clean, chalky scent of dust after wind. South and west, the land grows drier and then greener again, stitched with canals and orchards, bright as a felt rug spooled across beige stone. Traders know these roads like shepherds know faces. In the markets, dates and almonds change hands with the pleasant clink of small agreements. This is Khwarezm's world, ruled by a Shah who counts caravans as carefully as some men count stars. And into this orderly hallway of commerce comes an argument disguised as business. A caravan seized, envoys mishandled, letters that do not receive the right weather of respect. A single breach of hospitality on a frontier town's doorstep and the wind changes. We keep the volume low. The names move cleanly. Otra, the seer Daria's patience. A governor called Inalchuk, sometimes titled Gaya Khan in the sources, who takes hold of a Mongol-led caravan as if it were a rope he means to claim. The error multiplies. When men wearing the Khan's trust arrive to ask what happened, they are in some accounts arrested and killed. In a world built on the holiness of the guest's right to safety, this is not a mere insult. It is a broken plank on a bridge everyone must walk. News rides on good horses. It arrives at the Mongol court like a sheet of ice through the tent flap. Genghis Khan listens with that stillness you can almost hear. He answers with letters first, request to the Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad. that the local offender be handed over and the breach mended in a manner that lets the road breathe again. The reply is not the repair he asked for. The argument, already alive, grows long legs. From the steppe, a moving state leans west, not as a shout but as a series of sentences. Scouts threaded ahead, bridges rolled on carts, sacks of grain and mare's milk lashed into tidy, persuasive bundles. The wind does what wind does. People do the planning. In the distance, desert glitters like a promise and like a dam. What rides now is an army trained in attention. Each rider has spare mounts, hooves like punctuation you can feel in your chest. Bows sit under felt when the air throws needles. Bowstrings are waxed with the care of mothers braiding hair. Quartermasters speak a cordial dialect with wheelwrights and cooks and engineers. The decimal organisation hums like a loom. Tens feeding hundreds who feed thousands who feed a tumen. While the keshig keep the centre quiet. A circle within a circle like the crown of a gare. Winter is no enemy. It is a collaborator whose tempo makes rivers into roads and dunes into ideas. When the weather permits, riders go at night to spare the horses and the water skins, and by day the camp behaves like a household that has perfected the art of packing. The world they enter is capable, beautiful, and well furnished with rules of its own. Quaresma's domains are netted with irrigation, fruit trees planted like promises, canals that gleam against heat, cities whose gates are shaped by money as much as by war. The Shah's administration writes in Arabic and Persian, uses seals that click like small devices of legitimacy, and practices tax in the way careful men practice music. Governors keep ledgers, judges keep tempers, caravansaries offer water and a night's safety in exchange for the oldest fee there is, trust. Between those stone comforts and the rider's felt competence, a misunderstanding as lethal as it is tidy now takes its course. Genghis Khan divides his forces the way a skilled hand divides dough, precisely and for specific purposes. Against Otrar, where the original bruise sits, he sends a portion to lay a patient ring. Other columns move like clever rumours, one toward Bukhara, one toward Samarkand, another north to test the seer's crossings. Subadeh and Jebe, those students of distance, either with the main body or as detached wings at different moments, draw curls and hooks on the map that look like the handwriting of someone who never crosses the same way twice, and is always right anyway. The Shah, reading scattered reports, tries to collect his far-flung strength into one solid answer. But the geometry favours the riders who have practised folding space. We take a halt at Bukhara in our telling, not because the sound of surrender or resistance is pleasing, but because this city is an index of the system at work. Even now you can walk old streets and see turquoise domes stitched against a sky so blue it seems invented. The sources, some thrilled, some dour, remember a day when Mongol riders appeared, where watchers had not expected any horse to be. The city gates belong to a story of stone power. The steppe answered with a story about speed. Instead of lingering over engines and ladders, we stand in the aftermath with a modest, important question. What do you do with a city that has been afraid? The answer is lists. The answer is ledgers. Grain stores are counted. Artisans are registered. A promise is made that those who repair and teach and cook and carve will find their hands still valuable tomorrow. A congregation of silence gathers around the memories of those hard hours. We do not blow on those embers. We note instead the careful opening of markets under watch, the setting of sentries where chaos would breed, the invitations to scribes and scholars to keep doing their work because knowledge, like a canal, turns out to be useful in every season. Samarkand, bright as a bowl glazed for feast days, stands next in the wind, its walls thoughtful and its garrison strong with fearless cavalry. The Shah's field forces and city defenders hope for a large set-piece battle in which weight can persuade the stars. The riders, preferring mathematics to theatre, multiply pressure instead. Bridges roll forward like arguments no one can quite contradict. Engineers, many already recruited from the east in earlier campaigns, decide where to make the earth behave. Negotiations flicker, like carp in green water. Terms offered, withdrawn, revised. Inside the city, confidence fades like dye in sun. Outside, the felt tents hold their steady weather. When the end comes, it looks less like triumph than like paperwork again. A city added to a ledger. A promise that markets will not be salted, that those who choose to stay will be asked to do their work, not their penance. The Shah moves, west, then south, then west again, as men who have practiced command sometimes must when power separates from proximity. He's neither coward nor fool. He knows the arithmetic of survival. But the rider's radius is longer than the calendars in his advisors' heads. Sube'etei and Jebei press the pursuit with a cord that stretches and does not snap. Rivers are crossed at odd places, mountain passes tested like locks with many keys. There is a winter moment, the kind of moment that turns frost into policy, when the pursuers understand that the object is not merely to tag the Shah, but to read the land itself by the act of trying. They are making a table of roads, a grammar of towns, a sense of where future embassies will pause for tea. When Ala ad-Din Muhammad finally dies on an island in the Caspian Sea, in flight and in thought, the pursuit ends in a small, tired sigh. The lesson, how wide the West truly is and how thin the seams in certain rocks, remains. Back east of that long chase, other cities learn the manners of this new weather. Urgenk, Gurganj, rich and river-bound, resists with a courage equal to its wealth. The details of its taking in many accounts are bitter. Our voice softens here, steps past the darker stones. We mark only that canals can be unstitched as well as woven, that great towns can trade a generation of glitter for a generation of grit. Farther south, Merv and Nishapur enter the chronicles with the kind of ink no one likes to write with. We refuse the inventory of grief. We attend to the policies that travel with the horsehair banners, the priority of artisans and translators, the strict shelter afforded to those who heal bodies and make tools. The iron law that killed envoys are a kind of thunder you cannot ignore twice. Khwarezm is not a single door, but a hallway with many rooms. In some places, surrender comes amid sober calculations about tomorrow's bread. In others, councils choose defiance, and new ruins join old ones on shelves the wind is forever dusting. The Mongol administration plants posts in the wake of armies, as the gardeners place stakes, at river bends, at caravanserai, near market squares where doorways remember the movement of coins. Darogachi, overseers, arrive with briefcases the size of saddlebags and a talent for balancing price against peace. When they are wise, the town sighs with relief. When they are not, letters flow back along the Yam with critical speed. A state that travels still has to sit down and eat. Supervision becomes a breakfast food. What made this campaign different from the old raids that came and went like storms? The riders' willingness to live with cities afterward. Cities ask rude questions of conquerors. Can you count? Can you repair? Can you restrain? The answer here is a qualified yes. Ledgers swell. Translators become celebrities in that quiet, ink-stained way. A scribe who can render Persian petitions into Mongolian orders and back again finds his tent as popular as a merchant's in a bad year for rain. Metal tablets, the paetier of authority, cross deserts hanging beneath cloaks, and with them a small but potent idea. An official with the right token can pass, receive and command in the name of a centre that might be 1,000 miles away. Authority becomes portable. You can almost hear future empires taking notes. Sube'etei and Jebei, finished with their first long essay on the Shah's geography, are given a new exam, ride through the Caucasus and learn what waits beyond. The tale that follows has the clean lines of a map drawn with a new pen. North of the Caspian, steppe peoples, the Kipchaks or Cumans, shift and argue and ally. West of the mountains, the principalities of the Rus braid and unbraid their rivalries like cords not quite ready to carry weight together. The two generals move like patient arguments, sometimes coaxing, sometimes insisting, always noting the edges of others' imaginations and travelling just beyond them. A gate in the mountains, Derbent, becomes less a place than a test of how many languages a password can speak. Ambushes flicker, bargains mutate, fords decide whether to be friendly. This is not conquest yet. It is reconnaissance dressed as poetry. In 1223, at a river, the chronicles call Kalka, the reconnaissance grows teeth. Rus's princes and their allies draw up a fight in the old style. Banners taut, intentions tidy. The Mongol forces pretend to be fragile, then become a wind at exactly the moment expensive armour wishes it were weatherproof. The day belongs to those who have rehearsed repetition until it looks like inspiration. After the victory, the riders do not stay to polish trophies. They go back to the steppe the way travellers return to a well-watered camp, swiftly, with relief and with stories that will become policy. If you listen carefully, you will hear in the hoof beats not boast, but calculation. The west is reachable. It is not yet urgent, but it will keep. Back in the shadow of the old Oxus, a second kind of work continues, the knucklebone labour of making the extraordinary safe for pedestrians. The yam stations in the newly annexed regions learn new faces and new distances. A boy in a courtyard in Bukhara runs messages 2 streets, then 3, and decides he likes the taste of errands. A postmaster near Merv acquires a ledger from a Persian scribe and copies its headings with loving care. A wheelwright in Samarkand realises that if you band the rims just so, a cart hums happier over salt-crusted ground, and his idea spreads post by post faster than a rumour and twice as useful. Policy is only sometimes made in tents. Often it's made under a cart with a hammer. There is kindness, too, of the hard-wearing variety. A surgeon who sets bones in a little shop near the bazaar finds that the guard now walks patients there instead of carrying splints into the field. A stonemason's daughter becomes a bridge contractor because she knows the curve that water respects in spring. A calligrapher is asked to paint Pisa in a script that eyes trust at a glance, and he only blots the ink twice, both times on purpose. Tolerance is not a mood in these choices, it is the method that gets you soup. Conquerors who try to make the world a single vowel are always hungry. This household insists on entire alphabets. Still, the campaign takes its price. We will not inventory the empty houses. We will say only that wind moves into any room that people leave, and that the wind knows all the prayers and none of them. The Mongol leadership learns its own lesson from this. Speedy submission saves lives, and the letters that go ahead of cavalry repeat this plain arithmetic. The governor who opens his gate early receives a mask of protection that fits better than the one he might have stolen later. Come out, the letters say in many languages, and bring your engineers. If the line sometimes feels like a joke, bring your engineers, bring your bakers, bring your sensible shoes, it is because humour has a way of revealing policy. You keep what keeps you. We should pause with Genghis Khan himself, who moves in this story like a steady weight on the moving scale. He does not pretend to be a scholar of irrigation. He listens to those who are. He praises good bridges as if they were suns, and corrects bad officers as if they were leaky roofs, firmly then moves on. He keeps track of the names of men who do not make speeches and gives them more to do. He remembers the rule that made the empire possible, that leadership is noticing, repeated. In camp, he accepts that engineers now stand near the tent's centre, the way archers once did. He does not resent it. The empire he wants must be able to survive a winter without heroics. On certain evenings, after the lists have been tied up with red cord and a last messenger coaxed into eating something hot before riding, a quiet settles that feels unfamiliar to veterans of the old entirely mobile days. It is the quiet of a place that will still be there in the morning. The steppe has its own comfort, the skill of making home every twilight. But cities offer a different cradle. Walls that lean in, canals that talk at night, the stubborn kindness of infrastructure. The Khan looks at these things the way a herder looks at a fenced pasture, curious, sceptical, and then increasingly interested. He begins to think in terms of stations and stores, of where to place men who can be trusted to make small decisions well. That is a ruler's conversion, to see the beauty in clerks. The humour does not vanish. How could it? It merely shifts. A carpenter in Samarkand claims he has invented the folding bridge and by coincidence happens to be standing on one. A smith in Bukhara declares that siege engines are just very sincere furniture. A boy at a relay post correcting a harried courier announces that kettles do not in fact boil faster if you stare. In each joke lies the same contentment. The machine of daily life is running again, even if its parts now wear new names. And that hum you hear under the jokes, like bees in a wall, that is the sound of taxis learning to walk rather than run. Not every appointment works. A Daragachi who forgets that markets breathe finds himself recalled with the same calm speed that delivered him. A garrison commander who consumes too many favours learns that the guard keeps lists as neatly as bakers keep flowers. The Khan's court prefers habit to tantrum. It corrects by sending the next person with better instructions. In a world that has often met power as noise, this quiet competence unsettles at first and then comforts, the way a lamp surprises you by being exactly where you hoped it would be, again. News from the far-chasing generals returns like birds with new songs in their throats. The Caucasus is crossable. The peoples beyond the Caspian are as complex as any meadow. The princes of the Rus are brave, their alliances perishable. The maps posted near the centre tent grow more confident lines, the edges less jagged with ignorance. Sometimes a merchant stands before a map with his finger at an angle and tells the officers how he once went that way in a year of good rain and will not go that way again in a year of wind. Everyone listens. If the campaign against Khwarezm began as a punishment, it has become a school. A last scene softened with the dust that evening makes. On the edge of the Kizilkum, where the sand remembers every footprint as if keeping a ledger of souls, a small detachment prepares to cross to a river bend where goods and news await. Water skins are tested by squeezing, the way you test bread. A camel complains in vowels. A horse lays its head against a boy's shoulder and breathes. The night is cold in that wry way deserts love, as if temperature were a joke told on the hour. A captain checks the stars and the quivers and the pegs on the baggage harness with the same hand equally gentle. "We travel light," he says, and someone answers, We live light," and someone else grinning adds, "But the taxis travel heavy," and the camp laughs quietly together. At Bukhara, a scribe sets his pen down and flexes the cramped wing of his hand. He has copied a set of tolerances for bridge building into Persian, for a team of carpenters from the north who are learning that water has the personality of a prince. In Samarkand, an old potter teaches a young guard the patient pulse of a wheel. The guard will never throw a bowl worth keeping, but he will from now on speak more gently to men who do. In the wider West, fostered by Subudi's long thought, people tell one another about horsemen who move like weather, and about letters that arrive before hoofbeats. The legends begin to gather stitching, some too sharp, some too bright, and in the middle of the embroidery, a practical thread repeats. Surrender early, keep your artisans, learn to read the Paiser at a glance. If you step outside the tent just now, the stars stand as they did on the Onnen's banks, though they look different over warm brick. Wind traces its fingertip along canal water and is amused by its own reflection. Somewhere a relay horse paces, eager to run, as if messages were a kind of sport. The Khan passes through the camp in his quiet way, like a necessary thought you didn't realise you were about to have. He looks west, not with hunger, but with a builder's curiosity. What connects? What needs mending? What time will do if given a road? We began with a caravan interrupted, and find ourselves many chapters later inside a larger caravan that has no single leader and no single destination, but nevertheless moves quite steadily towards something like order. It is a difficult, sometimes clumsy piece to carry, heavy when mismanaged, light when correctly loaded. It smells of leather and ink and millet and iron and a little of hope warmed beside a kettle. The steppe has stretched to hold orchards. The tent's rope has learned the habits of stone. Before we let the fire settle, take one more fragment for your pocket. That policy can be tactile, felt like rope between your fingers, smoothed like a grain sack tied tight. That letters sent ahead of armies are a kindness to both. That punishment, if it is to build anything, must end by recruiting carpenters. And that a pigeon's steady beat, invisible over sleeping dunes, may be the most powerful sound in an empire, because it says the message will arrive and the roads will keep their promise. The ember sinks, the kettle's quiet, the guard taps his spear once, just to be sure he still knows where the ground is. Somewhere, Subide watches a river decide what kind of bridge it wants and smiles a small patient smile. Somewhere else, Jebby tests a path that wasn't there this morning, and finds it exactly where it needs to be. In the centre, the Khan closes his hand on the idea that has guided him since the hungry winters, that a life is made of small things arranged correctly. The caravan that was interrupted now moves again, larger, wiser, furnished with stamps and seals and stories. And the steppe, obliging as ever, amused as ever, listens back. The embers from the western campaigners cool to a steady orange, and the camp settles into that special quiet that only follows long motion. Ropes untwist, saddles sigh as if relieved to be furniture again. Account books come out, each page edged with the patient dust of travel. In the glow of a kettle that refuses to hurry, kettles never do, clerks set their brushes to work, listing names that are, in their own way, roads, carpenters, postmasters, bridge watchers, translators whose fingers now hold the empire together one sentence at a time. Out beyond the lamplight, horses breathe like bellows, finishing a day's work. A camel complains to a star. The wind, for once, is not in a mood to argue. From this calm hum of after work, the shape of governance thickens. Newly folded towns in Transoxiana learn the empire's habits, that markets should open early and gossip should lag behind grain carts, that envoys are to be treated as if tomorrow depends on it, because tomorrow often does, that an official tablet, a paisa, is a key to water, fodder, and the courtesy of quick decisions. A governor in Bukhara counts the sacks stacked neatly along a wall and writes, "Safe," in a margin as if labelling a mood. In Samarkand, a scribe bends low over a Persian petition and returns it cleanly into Mongolian, neither language offended, both a little proud. If anyone asks what victory looks like, the answer is not a banner snapping in a high wind. It is a postmaster remembering each rider's preferred girth hole and getting it right. And yet, for all the comfort of lists and ledgers, there is a tug to the east, a thread that has been waiting patiently to be pulled taut. Years before, when the white standards were still new, a northern confederation had ridden south into the Gansu corridor, learning the manners of walls and watchtowers, and the state called Western Jia, Tangut in many tongues, had learned both the kindness and the firmness of the Mongol request. Submission had been sworn around 1209, the kind of sworn that looks steady until the weather changes. Later, when the empire leaned west toward Khwarizm, the Tangut court measured its distance, weighed obligations, and in the arithmetic of self-preservation declared the sum inconvenient. Men who keep their promises, and a leader who asks the world to keep its bridges intact, took notes. So the message runs along the posts in the winter of 1225 and the spring of 1226. The Khan will ride east. It goes with the same calm authority that orders grain allocations. No drum rolls, no speeches, just the crisp decision that makes 1,000 small decisions line up like pegs. The yam hums. Relay horses flick their ears as if they'd been expecting this for weeks. In the map's tent, the Gansu corridor opens long and narrow, like a book's spine, cities stitched along it like neat, purposeful thread. Liangzhou, Ganzhou, Suzhou, Guazhou, and farther, the desert edging in with the sort of confidence only sand can have. Engineers fold in, as they always do now, carrying not just saws and plans, but the quiet authority of people who know where bridges should sit, and how a river prefers to be asked to cooperate. The army that turns its face toward the Hexi is a seasoned household. Horses share the work with camels, whose complaints are constant and heartfelt, but whose feet never argue with dunes. Water skins are tested by squeeze and by superstition. Rope is wiped with fat and coiled with the same care used for prayer strings. Bows, under their felt covers, keep their humidity on a short leash. The decimal formations, Arban, Zun, Mingan, Tumen, are more than numbers now. They are friendships that fit like saddles, each small unit a memory of shared winters and well-timed laughs. The guard keeps the centre as usual, not a wall so much as a weather system that makes order feel predictable. The Khan's own tent is as it has always been, tidy, mobile, and more interested in tomorrow's lists than today's applause. The corridor, when reached, feels less like a path and more like a conversation that stone keeps having with wind. City gates open to negotiation or close to it. Either way, the manner of address stays the same. Letters arrive first with their long, reasonable sentences. Keep your markets, register your artisans, supply horses and grain in season, honour envoys, come under the white standards and prosper. A governor whose mathematics lines up with these lines decides sleep is a pleasure he misses and chooses to keep it. A general who believes stone is a teacher refuses to move to the front of the class. Ladders and towers frown at his optimism. We do not linger on the clamour. We note that the engineer's lists grow interesting. Timber counts, the right length for ropes if a wall is this tall, the patience of counterweights, and, above all, the polite persuasion known as water. Out here, Water is the monarch that changes its mask. Rivers make oases, ditches make livelihoods. A single canal is a necklace hung on a throat the colour of silt. The engineers, many of them trained in the Jin Wars and many more recruited from the towns that now wear Mongol administration comfortably, know the etiquette. Where a city opens, wells are protected like priests. Where a city insists on a longer conversation, dikes and diversions are drawn on bark with charcoal, the lines straight even though the men who drew them have learned to ride curved paths all their lives. Flooding is not a spectacle here. It is a last resort, a sentence said with a sigh, a way of reminding stone that it sits at the pleasure of physics. If water will do the work with less cost in bodies on both sides, it is invited politely to speak. The Khan rides the lines along this seam of the world, where dunes pretend to be mountains and the mountains pretend to be clouds. He wears the years easily. He listens to reports without letting pride sharpen his questions. He keeps the names of reliable men ready like coins. He spends carefully. Berta's light remains at the heart of camp. Hoelan's lessons have not lost an edge. His sons stand where sons should. Visible, teachable, given work that matters because work that matters also teaches. Joshi, eldest, is gone now, dead in the winter of 1225 or early 1226s in many reckonings, a loss that fitted the line of earlier family tensions but still took a piece of breath out of the tent. That absence does its quiet work. Decisions sharpen. The choice of Urgdi for succession, encouraged years earlier and spoken aloud with growing frequency, becomes less a plan and more a promise. The campaign moves as water might, testing into many places at once. Liangzhou, with its markets slicked by the river talk, learns quickly which calculations are sound. Ganzhou watches the dust to the north and sees that patience carries news faster than riders. Suzhou and Guizhou, the corridor's beads, feel the tug of the new centre and sway accordingly. Where fighting happens, we hold our voice low and examine what it leaves. A registry that now includes roofers and rope makers, a warehouse door with a fresh seal, a temple left to its bells and shade, a way station whose boy, every post seems to have one eternally 14, has figured out how to pour tea without spilling a drop even while counting saddles. A little humour creeps in at the edges, as it always does. Engineers hold themselves like philosophers, so the cavalry calls them rope scholars, and the engineers pretend they are annoyed. A camel consulted about a route expresses an opinion so strongly that a captain writes in his log, "We were overruled by an animal with 2 eyelids per eye." Acceptable maps arrive from a local clerk drawn with such flourishes that a Keshig officer asks, quite sincerely, if the mountains are meant to have eyelashes. The clerk blushes, and the maps, eyelashes and all, turn out to be very good. The Tangut court, Western Seer in the administrative tongue of neighbouring empires, has strengths that belong to old irrigated lands. Archives as thick as bread, music that refuses to be upstaged by cavalry, a habit of measuring time by harvest and tax, rather than by raid and return. Their rulers have names that ring like bronze when spoken under domes. Their scribes can argue footnotes into the ground. Their army, when it must, is brave on walls and clever on plains. But obligation, once allowed to fray, is a cloth that rarely remembers how to hold weight. The court sends envoys, then asks for more Dodhidgi, then sends little embassies bristling with compliments, then hesitates again. The delay is a strategy in many lands. Here it merely gives engineers room to discover exactly where a river likes to be invited into a moat. Past the corridor, the land swells toward the Ordos Bend and the Yellow River's careful moods. The capital, Zhongjing, the city the world will later call Yinchuan, sits with a confidence learned from water and brick. Fields reach toward it like hands. The air smells like grain that believes in itself. When the Mongol camp spread along its flanks in 1226, turning to the 1227, they do so with the steady breath of people who have learned that victory tastes less of speed and more of vegetables. Towers grow from timber, ropes hum like bees. Counterweights nod as if in a debate that has only one conclusion. The siege is not a shout. It is a long, precise sentence written in wood. Inside the city, chronicles say, courtiers argue, then stop arguing to count barley, then argue again. The people do what people always do, make soup, mend slippers, worry about roofs at the exact moment the roof cannot be fixed. At the palace, petitions multiply as if paper were a plant, and a ruler who has known respect as a habit feels it thin around him like cloth held up to a window. A delegation goes out one morning with terms dressed in courtesy. Another follows one evening with a smaller set. The Mongol answer is consistent and now famous. Mitts apply. Keep your scholars and your artisans, and accept the order that travels. That answer is not only kindness, it is thrift. A city kept alive pays taxes and produces maps. A city destroyed, well, we do not dwell on the seasons where outcomes turned hard and bitter elsewhere. Here, ringed by engines and by patient men whose boots have forgotten stone, the arithmetic hopes to resolve cleanly. And yet history loves complications as much as deserts love mornings. And in the summer of 1227, the clean line of policy develops an unexpected tremor. The Khan falls ill. How and why, the sources disagree with their usual vigour. One account, dressed in hunter's leather, says he hurt himself chasing game over uneven ground, horse and rider arguing over the same stone in the same second. Another speaks of a lingering fever that arrived as the spring turned hot, some whisper of an old arrow wound remembering itself. Later storytellers, who never met a dramatic flourish they didn't consider adopting, invent more, but we leave those on the shelf where folklore keeps its bright jars. We keep to the soft facts. The leader who has carried winters in his hands lies down in a tent that smells of felt, leather, and the faint medicinal sweetness of boiling willow bark. Outside, a siege continues to be a siege. Inside, breath counts itself. The guard rearranges the world's furniture. The tent grows quieter the way sound does in a snowstorm. Trusted men sit where sentences need to be finished and finish them. Berta remains the human lamp at the room's centre, steadying with presence. Sons and generals and secretaries come in by ones and twos, answer questions with the simplicity practiced by people who know the value of time. On a low table, just a board across two chests, because furniture here knows it may travel, rest items that keep an empire breathing. A short list of who is to receive which messages, a longer list of who must be told to expect the first list, the old seal, 2 fresh cords for tying bundles, and a plan that is older than any victory, the succession. Ogedei's name sits already in the air, and has for years. Chagatai's temper and talent have their place. Tolui's gifts, gravity, appetite for responsibility, a quiet generosity with men and resources have theirs. But the shape of the whole family's endurance, as the Khan has judged and the elders have come to accept, rests best with Ogedei. This is not a slight to brothers, it is the forgiveness of the future. So instructions move from the sleeping mat to the table to the envoys with a speed that has nothing showy about it. After the campaign's conclusion, after the business of this ring is done, there will be a great Kurultai to speak the name aloud and set it in the throat of the world. Until then, Tolui will hold the centre as regent, his hands as clean as the water poured at dawn. We pause with Tolui because the empire will pause with him. He is the youngest son, a man with a face made for holding in his mind at least 3 kinds of inventory at once. He respects engineers because they keep their promises, and he adores horses because they do the same. He will keep the guard pointed inward with one eye and outward with the other. He will make lists neither ornate nor boring. He will crucially refuse to improvise the succession. In short, he will make room for the ceremony that will come, and in making room he will keep the empire from wobbling where the world would love to see wobble. Back outside the tent, siege engines continue their slow conversations with stone. The diversion works. Here a bank raised, there a breach coaxed open by a river that knows the sound of gravity, as well as any bell knows the sound of prayer. We do not count falls or shout changes. We tally, as the administration does, provisions in and provisions out, messengers in and messengers out, decisions made and adhered to. And then, after months that feel like careful handwriting in a long margin, a door in the city opens, a fraction, and then all at once. Terms are offered, received, adjusted as little as a good carpenter trims a beam, and the city comes under the white standards. Some late chronicles say vengeance followed, punishment for the long disobedience of a court that refused to be a friend and was poor at being an enemy. Here, We hold the story like a warmed stone and allow it to be heavy without detailing the weight. Cities do not forget. Empires do not forget. But the sleep mind can meet the past better when our voice keeps a hand on its shoulder and does not let it run. Inside the tent, where breath came harder and then quieted, attendants draw the flap and let the air pause. At some point in August 1227, exact day given differently as sources often do, the man called Genghis Khan becomes a last command and then a memory that will be argued by centuries. The guard knows what to do. They knew long before, because people who keep tents ready for weather always know what to do before the cloud appears. The body is treated with a care that suggests both reverence and practicality. Plans for return are not surety bonds, they are habits. The way home runs across grass, over passes, past stations that hum with the communal pride of secrecy well kept. The route north is quiet on purpose. There are legends we leave on their hooks, rivers diverted to cover a grave, forests that decided to keep confidences, armies that made silence, a wall no one pushed through. What matters to our hands tonight is that the burial place remained hidden, and remained so in the world's larger imagination, likely somewhere in the Kenti-ai Mountains, perhaps near Burkan Khaldun, that old sacred slope where a boy learned how to listen. A grave undiscovered is a sentence left incomplete on purpose, and some sentences deserve that privilege. The empire he built does not need a marker to exist. It breathes in roads and in the stubborn good sense of people who can now cross distances without making a speech about it. The campaign ends with what campaigns always end with if they hope to last. Appointments. A darugachi, who is good with ledgers and better with people, is told to make himself a nuisance in all the right ways. A garrison learns the names of the alleyways and which roofs leak first. Translators find the few Tangut phrases that make men unclench and post them mentally at the front of their pallets. The market reopens with a little tremor in its hands and then, miraculously, counts change correctly by noon. At a way station beyond the walls, a boy who has learned to pour tea without looking begins to understand that his skill is not small after all. It is how decisions arrive warm. In the centre of the larger camp, Tolui sits the first evenings of Regency, like a man listening to a kettle, not rushing it, not letting it boil away, keeping it exactly where it should murmur. The guard leans into its purpose. Messages go to Chagatai and Ogedei with the sort of courtesy that is in fact a set of well-considered deadlines. To the commanders, the names you know already and the names only lists remember, go orders that are not daring but are precise. Hold, mend, count, wait for the council. The white standards shift their weight and settle. In a world over fond of symbols, restraint is a melody you have to tune your ear to. And once you hear it, you notice it everywhere. The distribution of lands, the great inheritance by which the founders' sons and their sons will be anchored, had been shaped before. Hoki's line, through Batuan order, would breathe west across broad pasture toward rivers where winter can be theatrical. Chagatai's portion held the middle, valleys and passes stern and beautiful. Ugedei's heartland included the steppes centre, and the responsibility that goes beyond grass, to keep the whole from wandering. Tolui, for his part, kept the hearth, the homeland, and the newly taken cities of North China, the deep-rooted care of a household that had become a horizon. None of these were fences, all were duties. The founder preferred to think in the grammar of obligation, not ownership. His will, as men remembered, and as clerks kept coefficients tidy, was a set of verbs. From the towns of the corridor to the palisades of Zhongdu, the empire's skeleton shows under the skin for a moment while the muscles adjust. The yam, those necklace posts, does its reliable friendly magic. A letter leaves the New Tangut capital, wears leather and dust and urgency, and turns up in a camp far off where a captain reads it aloud, grunts, and changes 3 patrol routes that afternoon. A tinkerer in Langzhou discovers a way to make axle grease out of a local resin that smells like pine and smugness. Within a month, carts are humming with it from one end of the corridor to the other. A monk teaches a guard a poem because both are waiting out a rain that lost interest halfway through. Later, the guard quotes the first 2 lines in a meeting and everyone thinks him improved. These are the little stitches. A coat this size needs many. As for Ogedei, somewhere he hears the cords draw tight. He's not a boy. He is a man with lines earned from laughter and from decisions made at the correct height. He drinks too much sometimes, the way men do when the day asks for more liquids than the throat really needs. But he's not the only ruler in history to balance vigour with a cup. He understands people, which is rarer and better than understanding plans. He does not hurry toward the Kurultai, he moves toward it. The elders gather, and their horses do that horse thing where they seem to approve of the horizon for reasons they have no obligation to announce. The word for the assembly carries with it, as always, a feeling like the pull of a river on a reed boat, steady, directional, exactly strong enough. We are not at that council yet. That belongs to the next part and the next rhythms. Here, we let the late summer light of 1227 rest on the city where the siege concludes, on the road that carries a quiet cortege north, on the relay station where a boy watches a Pisa catch a ray and thinks it looks like a small sun. We let the air keep its secrets because the people of the tent did. If there is a lesson in this soft concealment, it is that not every map must be exact to be true. The founder disappears the way a good rider disappears into his own horse. Nothing to see, and then suddenly the world moves because of him. At evening, in the camps that will soon become councils, the jokes return like dogs that know where they are fed. An engineer claims water is the best negotiator because it never interrupts and always gets its way. A courier proposes that kettles and messages share a union because both are underappreciated. A commander states, quite firmly, that sand should be taxed for the inconvenience it causes, and receives a bag of sand as a response, which is practically a policy paper in this household. People laugh. The laughter is not to pretend nothing is heavy, it is to keep the spine supple for what weight remains to be lifted. A little farther from the fire, a guard walks the circle with a spear that has learned the ground well enough to tap lightly, as a courtesy, at each turning. He passes a cart where two wheels snore like old men. He passes a camel that dreams with its eyes half open, which is indistinguishable from awake and may be a metaphor for the whole administration. He passes a tent where a clerk is still writing, because numbers have decided to multiply in the margins, and he steps a bit farther away to let the work continue sounding like rain. Under it all, the Empire does what good systems do after a founder is gone. It test runs its own balance. The guard waits. The posts run. The governors keep the ledgers from developing artistic leanings. The cavalry keep their saddles mended and their tempers readable. The engineers make lists that would bore a poet and delight a stable civilization. The laws, some written, many simply remembered through habit, continue to be the kind of laws that tell people where not to step, rather than where to kneel. If this sounds homely, that is because survival always is. Heroics are expensive, maintenance is a bargain, and then there is the private terrain where memory breathes. Berta sits with the women of the centre, the great tent that is also a household, and directs, with the same calm that has made cooks and quartermasters obey without feeling ordered. She remembers a sable coat traded for a promise. She remembers a boy brought home from capture with a mark on his neck where the world tried to keep him. She remembers a morning on the Yunnan with a sound like pure beginning. A person can keep these and still plan supper. She has always managed both. Beyond her circle, mothers call children inside with the same tone used for generations, the voice that says the world is big, but not bigger than love. Old men compare the stars to old decisions and find both more legible when standing up. Young officers practice not looking urgent, which is today's lesson. Tomorrow's will be gracefully looking urgent when it helps. The kettles never hurry. The wind tests the ridgepole and decides it approves. The sun says goodbye in a colour that painters will agree is impossible. Before we fold this chapter, take a souvenir tiny enough to travel in a closed palm. The knowledge that an empire is a kind of arranged breathing. Supply lines, laws, posts and polite letters, not glamorous, not loud, add up to a chest rising and falling through seasons that insist on being themselves. A founder taught that breath to thousands, then to millions, and when his own breath became a story instead of a sound, the breathing continued. That is a legacy kinder than any statue. A road that keeps its promise in the rain. A relay horse that nickers at the next rider without complaint. A city that opens its gate at dawn because life likes a timetable, and in the dunes beyond, the undeniable quiet of sand behaving like the honest calendar it is, counting in dawns. Night comes finally. The last engine ceases its gentle nodding. The last ledger closes with a sound like a well-made box. The last rider out of the city slows at the station because the station is home for 2 minutes and 30 heartbeats, which is often enough for a person to remember who they are. In the north, dark slopes wait that may hold a secret everyone politely pretends not to know. In the south, canals link hands with rivers and dream of harvests that do not care who collects. Between, along the corridor that our maps love like a spine, small lights appear and disappear where camps settle and shift, each a vowel in a word history has decided to keep saying. This part ends as the household itself does, with the soft closing. A palanquin once moved through a dark mile, hoofbeats muffled, lamp curtained against wind. Now the only motion is the memory of that motion, and the steady work of people arranging small things correctly. The white standards breathe in the night. The kettle sighs. A boy at a post listens for the next message and finds, to his surprise, that in the long minute before it comes, the world is already talking, quietly, competently, in the language the founder taught it. You can hear it if you stand very still, and the step, patient as always, listens back. Dawn arrives with the shyness of a guest, pale light feeling its way along rope and felt and the wooden bowls that kept their promises through the night. Somewhere a courier's horse, groomed and smug, lifts its head as if to say, yes, yes, the posts still run. The big noise is gone, the cymbals of siege, the drums of march, and what remains hums like a kettle that never quite boils. Messages, ledgers, repairs. The step is quieter, but not empty. After a founder, the world always asks the same question in 100 dialects. Will the road remember how to be a road? It does, because while a single rider can make a dash, only a Wada household can make a rhythm. The Great Khan is gone, the great habits remain. Tolui steadies the centre as agreed, a regent with a bookkeeper's conscience and a horseman's lungs. The guard closes a careful circle that is protection and also ceremony. Presence, here, is policy. Messengers go outward like breath, returning with the answers a state needs to hear. The yam still exchanges lathered horses for fresh. The paisa still unlocks doors. The daragachi still reads ledgers with the tolerant impatience of a person who wants numbers to behave. In tents and halls from the Hexy corridor to the cold grasses of the north, the empire rehearses itself and finds that it knows its lines. Soon enough, the people gather to say the name already alive on everyone's tongue. The Kurultai in 1229 doesn't so much create Ögedei as Great Khan as acknowledge a fact the households have been living toward. The assembly is a festival of steadiness. Horsehair standards combed by wind, bowls passed in the old order, elders speaking in that way elders do, where every sentence is an echo and also a door. There is ceremony, and there is the simple relief that ceremony offers people who have been carrying news in their chests. When the acclaim comes, it is a low sound, like leather, settling correctly on a well-made saddle. Ögedei rises into a job description older than any banner. Keep the tent upright in wind, keep the road honest, keep the fire ordinary. He starts, like all good builders, with places for people to stand. Karakoram, the capital that was a rumour when the founder lived, begins to acquire weight. Timber set straight, post holes that insist on being exactly where the plan says they must be. Stone that discovers it enjoys conversation with carpenters. It will not be a city with the vanity of canals and palaces taller than weather. It will be a place that knows what it is for. Warehouses, forges, offices that are tents in better armour. A great square where arguments can be resolved without making a mountain angry. An old joke goes around that Karakoram is a travelling camp that decided to try shoes. The shoes fit. But the real capital is still made of roots. The yam stretches farther, beads added to the necklace almost casually until you look up one day and realise it reaches from forests that breathe pine to deserts that speak in heat. Postmasters, those small kings of punctuality, get better at reading riders' faces and horses' ankles. The official tablets shine and then scuff and then shine again. Paisa are like coins too large to lose, authority you can hold. A courier arrives, drinks in the doorway because he refuses to stop moving, even while standing still, and is gone before the steam leaves the bowl. There is nothing romantic about it and everything admirable. When people say Pax Monglica in later centuries, they will mean this hum, the safety that lets time behave. Safety is a dozen small things arranged correctly. Weights and measures are taught to mind their manners. A sheaf of silk is a sheaf of silk in Khotan and in Kaifeng. Tolls that multiply on their own like weeds meet gardeners with clippers. Way stations keep extra fodder for when a caravan misjudges wind. The sentence, "Show me your pass," becomes less a challenge than a greeting. The glitter of a paisa in lamplight is a kind of handshake. Traders notice first because traders are always noticing. Fewer bribes, more receipts, fewer surprises while carrying eggs. A man who sells raisins in Samarkand can, with a little ambition and a letter of safe conduct, explain raisins to a baker in Zhongdu, who swears he has been doing fine without them and then happily changes recipes forever. Neither has to carry a sword to the meeting. The market square is our favourite classroom. In one corner, a craftsman from the west demonstrates a bellows that breathes without wheezing. In another, a scribe copies a petition into the neat vertical lines that Uyghur script gives to Mongolian words. A script adopted earlier, and now as calmly universal in this administration as the shape of a well-tied knot. Money is the coins here, bolts there, promises elsewhere. Where paper stands in for metal, officials are taught to keep their faces courageous and their ledgers exact. A judge sits under an awning and turns feuds into fines with the weary grace of someone who has learned that revenge is just a second job nobody needs. A monk buys ink from a Muslim merchant and then asks a Nestorian Christian how to keep it from freezing in winter. Tolerance is not a poster here, it is a shopping list. We can walk this piece in a daydream, start at a relay post near the Curlin where the grass under hoof is as springy as good felt, and watch a rider hand a message to a man who reads quickly and points without words to the next horse. The next station is at the mouth of a pass where a woman keeps ledgers perfectly straight even when her children argue like geese in the doorway. She knows who rode in, who left, and which saddle blanket was accidentally admired into a new ownership and needs to be returned with tact. The next is on the edge of a town where a carpenter prefers tea too sweet and a potter insists it is your moral duty to admire the glaze for at least 3 breaths before you drink. Every station breathes on behalf of the centre. Every bowl is the empire in a miniature. Held, warmed, useful. Systems like this love good information. Census rolls fatten, not because the state is greedy, but because the state is curious. How many households? How many herds? How many men with hands quick enough for archery and how many with minds that would rather count? Lists of bridges that need mending before the thaw. Lists of granaries that need watching because mice make politics look easy. Lists of translators who do not make people sound foolish when they are trying very hard not to. A man who can turn a Persian contract into a Mongolian instruction without bruising either is worth twice his weight in horsehair. He gets a place near the warm wall and a respectful quiet when he speaks. This too is a kind of power. Urgdi surrounds himself with such people. He keeps Sube'etei on the long road in the west because some talents should not be left indoors. He keeps bookkeepers near because a road that pays for itself is a road that lives to see winter. He keeps the laws close enough to touch. The yasa, part custom, part command, the stitched-together garment of rule, continues its modest ambition. Forbid the kinds of theft that make neighbours stop greeting each other. Protect envoys as if tomorrow depends on those who carry it. Reward useful skill the way other courts reward clever flattery. Punishments exist. We do not linger there. The accent throughout is on prevention, on the strong magic of a rule everyone already knows before the market opens. The family branches settle into their geography like rivers into familiar beds. To the west, Jochi's sons, Batu, order, inherit not only pasture but the assignment of a horizon. Their Ulus becomes the sort of space that maps later call the Golden Horde, a name that sounds like sunset caught in a bowl. It is felt and frost, wide water and long patience. South and middle, the Chagatai lands knit passes and markets, valleys that ask for bridges and hills that insist on watchtowers, a grammar of space that trains administrators to respect gravity. At the heart, Ogedei's portion includes the old steppe and the new responsibility of being the place all roads refer to when they say home. Tului's line, bearing hearth and hand-me-downs of the capital, carries more than a share of promise. Names like Monke, and Kublai are just boys for now, apprentices to a future no one can yet measure. Hulagu is not yet the long shadow west. He's a nephew with good posture. All of it breathes. None of it feels finished. The campaigns under Ögide are real, but we keep them dressed in maps rather than noise. East, the Jin, shrunk, stubborn, still learned in the art of surviving near walls, face the arithmetic of a foe that can wait and learn and return. By 1234, sources say, the dynasty dissolves into memory and into the job lists of men who know how to count grain. Farther south, the Song watch and trade and negotiate and prepare and sing better than anyone. Their day with the hoofbeats will come later, mostly under other names, other sons. West, the riders who learned rivers during the Khwarezm years now step beyond rumour, across the Volga, along the smoke-sweet forests of the Rus, through winters that turn the air to glass. Those who lived it describe the sound of hooves on frozen earth as something between a drum and a prayer. Sube'etei keeps his tempo sober as ever. When Ujade dies in 1241, recall orders ripple outward. The roads go into their other mode. Return, return, return. And the West feels for a moment what absence is. Even courage needs a calendar. It's not conquest, but connection that fills most days. Look at a caravan. The lead camel wears bells that refuse to argue with the wind. Bundles are stacked and tied with rope that has learned to hold the same knot the same way for years. Inside one bale, paper. Inside another, pepper. Inside a third, something with a smell no one it can agree to hate or like, which assures its sale. The caravan master, a specialist in hopes, carries folded letters from one governor to another, each stamped with seals that smell faintly of wax and importance. At a way station, horses sniff at camels with affectionate suspicion. Children share 6 words of 3 languages and realise it is enough for a game. A soldier buys a small painted toy for a niece he has never met. It rides the rest of the way wrapped in 2 socks and good intentions. The tolerance that markets require becomes the tolerance that administrations adopt. Mosques and temples and churches stand within a walk of each other in many towns, sounding mourning differently, agreeing on noon. A Nestorian physician shows a Buddhist monk a way to set a shoulder with less pain. The monk shares a tea that silences a cough like a polite librarian. An imam advises an official on the best day to schedule a tax collection if harmony is the goal. The official moves the date and pretends he thought of it himself. Every exchange is small. The sum is large. You could call it policy, but it feels more like seasonal common sense extended to belief and speech. Knowledge is the quietest merchant of all. Astronomers carry tables that make the night less confusing and find patrons in places where wind once hid everything. Map makers learn to ask horsemen about windbreaks and rice farmers about silt, and their drawings improve more from these answers than from any special compass. Paper money rides with caravans and meets areas that prefer silver by touch. Arguments are resolved not by shouting but by ledger, and the very persuasive line, "This can be weighed." Gunpowder's recipes are handled like gossip, whispered, adjusted, sometimes misunderstood, then suddenly commonplace. Printing creeps into new corners the way vines do. What we call exchange will later be wrapped in long words. Just now it is a man in a neat coat comparing measurements with a woman who knows exactly how wide a bolt of cloth should be if you want a tent to keep out rain. Whispers too travel. The Empire's breadth, its speed, its appetite for lists, all create rumours that pop like bubbles on the lips of travellers. In Europe, later chroniclers will write things that sound like bedtime stories told by a nervous uncle. Cities swallowed whole, riders who never sleep, arrows that darken the sun. In lands closer to the centre, tales gain embroidery of a different kind. A Khan who treats all faiths as guests, a guard who can smell dishonesty as if it were smoke, a postmaster who knows when a letter must be hurried because it's tied with a certain red string. And everywhere the founder's name gathers nicknames: hero, scourge, lawgiver, destroyer, that say less about him than about the angle of the light where the teller lives. Memory is a room with many windows. We stand in the doorway, nod and move on. Back in Karakorum, a bell rings for a council, and the square fills with ordinary miracles. A blacksmith argues with a wheelwright and both are right. A scribe shows a governor that if you add 3 columns and then divide by a number no one can remember, the tax becomes decent rather than cruel. A woman from the artisan quarter petitions for a bridge where the market puddles every rain. Engineers nod in the slow rhythm that means, we already measured. You're correct, it will be done in spring. A boy runs behind a foreign envoy imitating his stride, and is gently redirected by a guard who has practiced 8 ways to be kind while still being a guard. Governance, like good soup, depends on timing more than genius. Perhaps you're wondering, what was the secret in the end? There isn't one. There are only the same materials you've felt beneath your fingers since part 1. Felt to make walls that keep warmth as if it were a promise. Leather to tie together men and ideas. Iron to hold edges and to temper wills. Rope to keep a load honest. Wax to press the seal that makes a word heavy enough to carry. Ink to make memory portable. Hooves to make distance smaller than pride. The founder organised these things until they spoke in chorus. His sons and their sons keep the song in tune. And where they forget, postmasters remind them it is not flawless. No song is, but it carries. Even the law that is not written on bark but on habit keeps working after the hand that shaped it is gone. Intolerance shows up sometimes with important eyebrows, and the camp nudges it to the door. Greed leans too hard on a market. The guard, no longer a mere wall but a manor, leans back. A general decides his tent is a palace, and someone, in a voice warm with respect and edged with arithmetic, explains that palaces pay rent to their people. The empire is large enough now to survive a few fools at a time. That, more than any banner, is what makes it imperial. The seasons turn, under Urgeday's hand the Jinn cease to be the enemy in the north, and lines redrawn on maps are matched by new habits in the towns. A market opens earlier. A magistrate greets a merchant with a name instead of a suspicion. In far-off valleys, treaties sing to themselves and hope no one notices they are slightly off-key. Someone always does. Batu in the west begins to be Batu in the way stones begin to be monuments, by standing where people must pass. Chagatai's Ulus becomes a place where translators become unexpectedly famous. Tuluid children grow taller, their hands already learning the architecture of ropes and maps. It is a living thing, this inheritance. It takes advice from weather and corrections from grain. A traveller of later centuries, imagine a Venetian with good boots and an appetite for narrative, walks the roads made safer by the hum and writes about it as if he invented observation. He loves paper money because it frightens him a little and still works. He meets an officer whose title he cannot translate, and a bridge whose curve he tries to sketch and fails. He eats noodles at a post where the cook declares she is too busy to charm, but feeds him twice as much out of professional pride. He gets a Pisa stamped that makes doors open before his fist remembers to knock. What will he carry home? Not a map, though he'll try, but a sound, the regular forgiving rhythm of a system that wants things to arrive. We have saved a few quiet rooms for memory. In one, scholars argue gently over the founder's decisions the way musicians argue tempos, not to scold, but to understand how the piece breathes. In another, storytellers warm their hands over a brazier and tell the night in the simple register of the domestic epic how a boy with a kangi around his neck became a man with a nation under his shoulders, how a sable coat was a sentence in a language of alliances, how a law about stolen horses is also a law about stolen mornings. In a third, a family sits at dinner in a town that did not exist under this name a generation ago, and their only part of their day worth retelling is the price of onions. That's policy winning. Sometimes, in the square at Karakoram, an old woman scolds a magistrate for walking too fast past a beggar. The magistrate stops, returns, and suddenly invents a new rule about bowls of millet at the court door for anyone who needs them. The old woman nods as if this had been on the agenda all along. News of such small events travels weirdly far. A captain on the northern frontier hears it and orders his men to sweep the station yard twice instead of once. He will never know why he thought of it. He will sleep better for months. Toward the end of Ögedi's days, couriers still run, ledgers still purr, bridges still ask to be checked after the first freeze, and the empire feels, what is the word, practiced. When he dies, the recall of generals proves the system's muscle memory again. A great state folds its arms and waits to choose a name without smashing anything in the process. Monka's day will come, and then Kublai's Hulagus. You already feel the branches lengthening like shadows in late afternoon, reaching into China proper, into Persia, into the forests where snow never admits to being spring's friend. But that is another pacing, another set of kettles, another collection of boots. Our story, like all good journeys, knows when to stand and look back over the ground. So let's do that. In part 1, a boy stood by the onnen, the felt of his world stitched to the weather. The lessons in his hands still fish nets and bowstrings. In part 2, a unifier taught numbers to behave and people to see skill as a family name. In part 3, stone learned it could negotiate with patients and engineers, and a capital of an old dynasty listened to new ledgers. In part 4, a caravan's insult grew into a map, and westward roads discovered they preferred being roads to being rumours. In part 5, the founder's last campaign braided duty and water, until a city surrendered not to noise but to arithmetic, and a tent fell quiet with the kind of quiet that is full of instruction. Now, in part 6, the hoofprints have become roots, and the roots have become a kind of morality. Show up, keep accounts, keep promises, pour tea, take, if you like, one more small joke to put between the pages for later. An engineer in Karakoram maintains that bridges are simply very cooperative rivers, while a postmaster insists that messages are just polite horses. Both are wrong. Both are right. The truth is that people, given a little room and a fair rule, build the thing in front of them and then the thing after that, and in time the things touch. That is the whole trick. That is the whole comfort. Night falls the way it always has, out there where the grass writes in long handwriting and the stars are never embarrassed to be obvious, in a chair pitched for an official now stationed far from his childhood. A kettle breathes in the centre, while a child kicks sleepily at a blanket and is tucked back in by hands that smell of ink and wool. The felt walls keep the world at a friendly distance. A saddle, cleaned and oiled, leans against a chest. A pizer rests on a folded cloak like a moon that's decided to be useful. Outside, a relay horse stamps once, as if checking the earth is still arranged correctly. 1,000 miles away, or 3 days by the posts, grain is counted, and a woman in a market cracks a joke about how taxes seem weightless until you carry them. Laughter answers in 3 languages and 1 feeling. Somewhere, an envoy sleeps with his boots near the bed because tomorrow might come early, and a clerk has already left water by the door. Up in the north, under slopes that may or may not keep a secret, wind passes through larch and pine and says nothing, which is the way the best guardians keep faith. Downriver, the Onnen runs under a rind of ice so thin the sun can't stop looking at itself. We end as we began, because circles are kind to the mind. The felt door lifts and settles. The kettle sighs. The leather creaks a polite hello. On the other side of the world from the first morning we shared, a new morning stands up and puts its boots on. That is the legacy. Not only lands and names and lists, but the habit of mornings that go well because someone remembered the rope, the wax, the ink, the road. Power here turned out to be portable, and mercy turned out to be efficient, and together they learned the stepp's oldest lesson, that a life, like an empire, is made of small things arranged correctly. Listen, do you hear it? Hoofbeats, but only in the distance, organised and unhurried. A message going where it needs to go, the road keeping its promise, and the step patient and amused, listening back. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a quiet close. The story lingers, like the last glow of candlelight, as you drift further into rest. If these gentle wanderings bring you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so that whenever you wish, you may return, and we can travel together once more. For now, dear listener, may your dreams be kind, and your night be restful. Until next time.